Episode of Bedtime Stories with Sid. This is episode 5, and I'm going to wrap up the 60s and move towards the 70s. So, in the 1960s, there were two major hurricanes. The first one was Hurricane Betsy, and that was, I think, in like around 1964, 63, 64, and then Hurricane Camille, which was in 1969. And those were very devastating to the area. A lot of energy built up in this area. Lots and lots of people were without a home, or there was damage, a lot of damage to the Gulf Coast, especially for Hurricane Camille. It wiped out all the fun things I did as a child, like Deer Ranch was gone after Camille. It was a place we used to go. It was like a place we went and fed animals like deer and rabbits and chickens and stuff. And they had like a big saloon, and they had like can girls and a shootout, and they had the marine life was on the Gulf Coast there, and they had tons of hotels. But after Camille, all of that was gone, pretty much all of it. Since then, it's been building up, but mostly casinos now. Didn't have any casinos back then, but it was lots of family activity on the Gulf Coast back in those days. After Betsy, that was the one in the early 90s. I think it was 1965, actually, because I was like 4 years old, because I remember Betsy. Hurricane Betsy, we went and stayed by our aunt's house. My mom drove through City Park. We left our house in Bucktown because the wind was hitting our house so hard that it felt like the walls were going to cave in. So we got in the car. We got in two cars and we drove to my aunt's. My mother drove. My mother was leading the way, and the only way she knew how to get there was through the park with all these trees, and trees were flying across the street and falling over, and it was storming and raining. But we made it without getting hit by a tree, so that was good. And then we ended up at my aunt's. But after that, we took a ride down to visit one of my dad's sisters down in Hopedale, Louisiana, and it was totally destroyed. Like, the one scene I remember, and I was 4 years old, I remember the steeple of the church was separated from the church and was down the street. And we went to see my aunt there she lived on a house that was built on pylons because it's a flood zone. So houses were built up really, really high. They climbed stairs to get into the main house. But my dad actually used to go out, catch alligators in the little canals on the side right there, him and my uncle Brownie. But being in that house, I have a lot of fond memories. We used to go there and visit my cousins, and we'd watch a lot of horror shows together, especially like Morgus the Magnificent and stuff. And we'd lay in bed. And that was kind of, I wanted to put that piece in here because that's kind of where, between Mama Mac and watching the shows with her, then my cousins were all into this. And so it was just kind of part of me. And, after Hurricane Camille, we had moved out of Bucktown at that time, and we actually went and stayed in a hotel with my grandmother Deanie, and we stayed in a hotel downtown. We lost all power, and then we found out when we got back home that the people who stayed in our house, which wasn't in Bucktown anymore, they actually had power, so we should have stayed home. But in that time frame, I had this Aunt Ethel, and she used to read cards for playing cards for my sister and my aunt. And she was very lucky, though. She could pull playing cards, and she'd be able to know if she was going to win at bingo or not. She was extremely lucky. Like, she would pull those cards, and she was really good. She did teach my sister and my aunt how to read them, but my sister got scared and stopped because she did some predictions that she didn't like, and so she stopped. And my oldest sister turned totally religious. Very much got into the Catholic faith. Church 3 times a week, all these wonderful things that she was doing because she got scared. So she's really turned her faith, and to this day she still has very strong faith. And I think that's why she doesn't see the things that me and my little sister see. We have faith, but it's not so much in the Catholic Church. We're more into the spirit or spiritualist. So it's just a little bit different, but faith is important, and I say that to everyone, that your faith is important in life because you have to have faith. It brings positivity, it brings motivation, it brings drive. And as long as your faith is in a positive format, that's something that's very, very good to keep. And so as we transition into the 70s, so I had this aunt that read playing cards, but she would never teach me because she didn't teach the guys in the family. So I went down because my aunt used to always take us down to the French Quarter, and we would go shopping in all the little shops downtown in New Orleans, and she took me into shop and I picked up some tarot cards. And that's when I first started reading cards at a very young age. I was probably like 10 or 11 when I got my first pack, but I didn't actually start reading them until I was like 13. And it was very scarce. I really didn't, I was in my 20s before I really started reading like on a regular basis, hit client after client after client. Before then, it was just me learning, exploring, and understanding, because I was never allowed to learn the playing cards. I did later on in life, but my aunt would never teach me, my Aunt Ethel. My grandmother hired her. She used to pick crabs. We had a seafood business in New Orleans, and my aunt used to pick crabs for us, and I had fond memories with her. She was always nice to me, but she just wouldn't teach me how to read. So playing cards. So I went on and got my own. And so I started doing mini reads, and this started in the 70s. So between 70 and 75 is when I started picking them up and learning, and kept all that to myself. And then the journey begins. Then I start reading, and as we move through the 70s, that's where you can learn how, I was very much into creative arts. I feel that was part of how I became and kept my intuition. I stayed very right brain because I was always into some type of arts. Back then it was dance, theater, those types of things. Did a lot of shows growing up, and had a great time. I was hardly ever home. I was very active, always on the go. Did a lot of travel, lots of just crazy stuff. And we lived in this house back then. From after Camille, we moved from, like I said, we had moved from Bucktown to like around the middle of Metairie, suburbia area. And then we moved back to Bucktown in my grandmother's old house, and we lived there for years. And that's when things really started to happen. That's when I started seeing a little redheaded guy we talked about earlier would pop up more and more and more. He'd peek around the corners, he'd laugh, he'd giggle, he'd move on. We had, the floors were given away. We had holes in the floor. I'll never forget that. That for a while it was just crazy. You had to watch where you walked in the house, because you could go right through the house and onto the ground. It was only up about 3 feet, but it was still high enough that it was kind of weird. So growing up in that house, I was really exposed to a lot of things. One of the memories I have there, which is one of the whoopings I got, was this guy who lived down the street. It was me and my cousin, and I'll never forget, he had vines growing in his window, like weeds. And I got really freaked out, and I thought I saw things going in and out of the house, which I thought were spirits or ghosts. So me and my cousin broke the windows to let him out. I was a kid then, so I didn't know much. But when my dad got home, that's one I could count on one hand, actually less than half of a hand, how many times my dad actually put a hand on me. And that was one of them. He got me and my cousin really good. He waited till he was in the bathtub. That's the good times to come get you. So anyway, so we had so I thought I saw things like going in and out of this guy's house. So I was seeing spirits. I thought if I could let them out, he would be safe. I was actually did it to protect him, but wound up getting in a lot of trouble. So this all started seeing these things more clear, started happening in the 70s. And as we move forward through the 70s, there's going to be a few more incidents that you can hear about. And then things get progressively moving forward after that. So tonight I'm going to end with that. The little story with the red-headed guy, and then the ghost, seeing the ghost going inside the house where I broke the windows. Oh, one more thing. We also did some investigation with trance work. That's when I first started doing trance work, believe it or not, where we actually worked on putting people into trance. And there was one of our neighbor's kids, and he went in like quick and easy. And it really kind of freaked me. One time we couldn't wake him up even. He was so deep that we couldn't even wake him up. And so really started exploring with a lot of that in those younger years. And then it just continued, because as life moved forward, things changed in my life, and therefore I changed with it. And so we're going to talk about that as we continue later on in another episode.